for some 500 talk? Thank you to Tom Barnes, our operations manager at Neuhoff Media in Danville, for putting that together. It's a typical radio guy. Tom said, okay, we're going to start this at exactly at 6:58. It goes for 3 minutes, so at exactly 6:01, Donald will hit the stage. The problem, Donald was in the bathroom. So he was making a pit stop. So ladies and gentlemen, our very good friend, Donald Davidson.
I hope I didn't throw it off too badly for you.
No, it was all good, as a matter of fact. Well, first of all, Donald, welcome back to Danville Vermilion County. The nice thing is that this is now the... Yeah, Tom wanted to make sure you heard the car going down the... What I think we all wanted to hear was a Novi going down the main straightaway for those old-timers. But it's great, Donald, that you've come back. This is the third time that Donald has done a Danville event, and Donald and I have done a few of these, not only in Danville, but Champaign and in Decatur and Central Illinois, and then the former mayor of Greencastle, Indiana. Let's give him a stand up, Mike. Mike Harmless, who's Donald's driver. When you're the former mayor, you're very organized, and Mike keeps track of Donald's schedule. I think maybe our first conversation about tonight occurred maybe like in November of last year, and Mike was going through his spreadsheet, and then Donald and I probably have talked 5 times about tonight and other things that we've got going on this year, and it's just such a treat. And not to put words in Donald's mouth, but this is a special group because you do a lot of service club events where you get wedged in between a banker and a fundraiser and a do-good dollar, and then 15 minutes worth of you, in which really should go more than an hour. And I will tell a story that last year I had Donald speak over in Decatur, Illinois at a Rotary Club, and as soon as the meeting was over, we threw the chairs in a circle, and we had, 20 people stop, wait, and then we went an extra hour, which was terrific. But here, these are all race fans, Donald. These are all great race fans and have been for years, and we're going to highlight a couple of people in the room, because more than a couple, because we have folks who have been going to the 500 without a break for 50, 60, and in one case, 73 years in this room tonight, which is correct. We also have a special guest. Kyle Kitzman, would you please stand up? Everybody knows Kyle's dad, Dave Kitzman, no booing please, from Danville Area Community College, but Kyle runs the motorsports division for Bell Helmets. And Kyle went to Covington. He is son of Dave, and Kyle brought some historic racing helmets too for us to enjoy. So Kyle, great to have you with us. Thanks for being here tonight. So that's cool. Tom and Mary Day, would you two please stand up? So Tom and Mary Day, special friends of ours. And for those of you that took the time to look at some of Tom's collection that came out of Tom's basement, these are models and some of the historic things that he has. For those of you that are big fans of the 1940s Blue Crown spark plugs, which sponsor 3 winners at the 500, they were actually a spark plug, and if you want to see a Blue Crown spark plug, Tom's got some Blue Crown spark plugs over here. My wife loves it. Julie in the back. Everybody say hello to Julie, my wife. You know what? She is one of the few, I love her very much, and she's very accommodating, because when we got married, there was a brick in our bedroom. Happens to be a Speedway paver, and now there's a spark plug in our bedroom, and it's a Blue Crown, and she still says that's okay, so I appreciate that. From my own personal collection, a few things over here in the corner that I brought in, including 3 signed photographs that I'm very proud of. I am not an autograph guy. Rarely will I ever ask anyone to sign anything for me, because I would rather have someone write me a letter that had personal meaning to it. But a number of years ago, I met 3 gentlemen, and they autographed a photograph of their winning cars at the Speedway, and I did ask them to sign it for me. And they just happened to be named Ruttman, Rathman, and two-time winner Roger Ward. And so I have those photographs over here. If you want to see those afterwards, that's pretty cool. You'll have to tell Julie that they're actually meaningful, because Tom goes, I'll trade my whole collection for your Rathman. So anyway, all that being said, we want to thank our sponsors too of tonight. Lee's Famous Recipe, chicken and strips. And when you go to the track, you want to bring your favorite chicken with you. I know our family does. We load up with the chicken strips. We zip them in a Ziploc bag. They're not allowed to touch them until lap 100, so that's part of our deal. He has been sick. But Mr. Rawhide Meat Company, would you please stand up? Joe Vincent, who is one of the great 500 fans. Joe Vincent is here tonight, and a really neat thing happened last year. Joe and the radio station, we sponsor the day before the 500 broadcast on WDAN and Saturday Morning Sports Talk. And last year, Joe brought in his family, nephew and his brother, from Iowa, and they came in and we shared 500 stories for a couple of hours on the radio and had a great time. And he also brought, can you believe it, food from Rawhide, so that was nice. You want to hang out with people that bring food. So Joe, thanks for being here. Joe has been really sick this week, so Joe, thank you for being here and being a big 500 fan, Donald. Also Trotter Run, let's hear it for Trotter Run and their staff. Your Moon Burgers tonight, very good. And Buddy's Home Furnishings. We really appreciate, I know a lot of people went out and got tickets for tonight and got their free stuff, and we really appreciate you doing that. And of course, our team, Michelle Campbell, our general manager, and Pat Swanson, and Cassie Keister, and our team here at the radio station. Hall of Famer Fowler Cannell is here tonight. He turns 95 years old. So, Fowler. Greg Dole and Chad Dare from the commercial news is also here, so be nice, because otherwise Chad will quote you if you ask a crazy question tonight. So I think, did I cover all the basic ground? Very good. So again, thank you very much. Can't say that enough. For me, this is like Christmas. Just love to come up here and spend a few minutes with Donald and talking about the 500. And Donald, first of all, how have you been?
It's fine, Mike. Thank you very much, and thanks for doing this again. We love coming over here, and I just really enjoyed your enthusiasm, and a gentleman was showing me a few photographs out of newspapers of the brick kilns over at Petersburg, and I think it was 1985. I don't remember when we first met, but 1985 you said, you've got to come over to Petersburg, because as these fellows meet in this diner, sort of like a Charlie Brown's thing, and they all worked at the kilns. And in some cases, they're second and third generation. Excuse me. Got a frog in my throat. I'll explain why in a moment. But anyway, these fellows get together every Wednesday or whatever it was. And so I met with you, and over we went. And I had a great time talking with those fellows. I learned a great deal. And I just remember it like it was yesterday. And then just enjoyed the oh, thank you. Oh, it's not a Corona, but that's okay.
That would be Donald's third.
I still got a chip left, but anyway, no, that was just great. And then the things that we've done over the years, and I was thinking of the WDANN connections, and I've done stuff for years. In fact, there was a show I used to do for a few years on a Saturday morning. I know we've talked about this in the past, and Bob Poon, who I had first met in Du Quoin a long time ago, and we did this Saturday morning program, and so it was a call-in, but a couple of times I would have other things going, and so I would call from the road, and I meant to look this up on the maps if I can remember where it was. It was maybe north of Covington. It was over in this neck of the woods, but on the Indiana side and a little higher. And so I figured, okay, well, I've got my family with me. We're going to go to this, May Day parade or whatever it is. And we'll stop and I'll do the calling. And back in those days, there was payphones, no problem at all. And so we pulled up at this one. I thought, okay, this will be a good place. I'm going to have to call in about 5 minutes, so let's stop right here. And so I dialed, and they said, okay. I said, I know I'm a little early, but I'm here, and I'll just do the call-in. What could possibly go wrong? Here comes a train. Oh, God. you know, just the happy-go-lucky local, just crawling along. And I thought, oh God, no. And then by the time we went on the air, I couldn't hear a damn thing. This train was going. But and I don't know why I would bring this up, but in golly, what year would this be? I'm embarrassing myself now. I was a boxing enthusiast. That's a long time ago. And the Brits embraced boxing, and my dad and I would get up, you know, like at 2, 3, 4 in the morning to hear world heavyweight title fights, because it would be, you know, 10 p.m. in New York and 4 o'clock in the morning in England or whatever. So after I got here, I thought, boy, it would be great to see a title fight. Well, you know, they were doing the Thriller in Manila and you know, Zaire, and I thought, well, it's Las Vegas, it's out of my realm now, it'll never happen. And then, lo and behold, Muhammad Ali took a fight because Don King always wanted to do a fight in his hometown, which was Cleveland. And I think it was 76. So anyway, I thought, God, a world heavyweight title fight in Cleveland, if ever I'm going to get the chance, this will be the only chance I'll get. And the tickets were $20. And it was at the stadium that was brand new at that time, but it was already gone, where the Cavaliers played, I believe, just on the south side of town. And the opponent was Chuck Wepner. And I thought, well, this is probably going to be, look at it, this is just basically going to be an Ali exhibition. But it was a title fight. And so up I go, and I got permission to cover for IBC, but I could do a pre-fight thing and then a wrap-up later, but obviously I couldn't do anything while they were on the air. And so I think I called in a couple of times and did reports, and then I watched the fight. And I really thought this thing's going to be 2, 3, 4 rounds. You'll see Ali, you can say you saw a heavyweight fight, it probably won't last very long. Well, Chuck Wepner stayed with it, and as probably some of you know, this was the inspiration for Stallone to make Rocky, was based on the Chuck Wepner fight. And so the thing finally it went to the 15th round, but it didn't go the distance. Well, I've been standing in the exit because I figured I got a great parking job, and I thought as soon as this thing's over, I'm out of here. I'll be the first one out the building and on the freeway and driving back. But I was going to file a report for IBC for like an overnighter for the next morning. And so I'm driving down the freeway, and it's, I don't know, 11 o'clock or something, so I pull over into a gas station. And I dial the number, and I'm doing the report, which is going to be played back on the news at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., and I'm standing there doing the report, and then all of a sudden, clang, 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 clang. Somebody came to get gas. I was standing right under the bell. I don't know why I told this story. It's got nothing to do with WDAN or why we're here, but a couple of stories that I may tell tonight. I love telling anecdotes, and just there were several coincidences yesterday and today that by golly, I think there's some stories I think I'm getting a sign I'm supposed to tell these stories. But anyway, let's proceed and see how we do. But thank you once again. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for your promotion, your love of racing, and the fact that you do all of these things. And I've just got to kind of wait. Are we recording this thing?
We are actually. I was going to remind everyone.
Oh, well, that cuts a few lines.
But it's okay. We can edit it. Tom Barnes is recording the audio of tonight's program. It will be available on podcast on VermilionCountyFirst.com, so you can listen to the stories later. Donald, though, has editing control. So if he says a story that he doesn't want on the podcast, Tom, we're going to edit it. So, Donald, you have free reign.
Well, just one of the things that we're doing this year, there are a couple of just quickly about the museum. There's going to be a Mario Andretti tribute, which opens at the end of April, and I think that runs like 5 or 6 months. But if you haven't been to the museum for a while, for the next another couple of weeks or so, but not much more than that, there's an exhibition called Who's Your Thunder? And it's a tribute to short track racing. And I think there's 41 cars over there, dirt cars, sprints, midgets, and Tony Stewart's represented, Jeff Gordon, Dave Darlin, Steve Butler. I don't think we got any Boom Boom Cannon stuff. In fact, I know we don't. But a lot of great, Vogler, and there's uniforms, and there's, Dave Darlin's got his quarter midget, and a uniform was on a mannequin that he wore when he was 10. It turns out I met Dave Darlin at a quarter midget banquet in Kokomo when he was 10. And I remember a lot of those people, like Eric Gordon and Robbie Stanley and Andy Hillenberg. I didn't know I met Dave Darlin until this year. But anyway, there's a lot of neat stuff then in dirt tracks, so you might want to get over. But what I was going to kid you about, that may take a little bit of editing, is that ABC covered the race starting in 1965. When it started, I was part of Wide World of Sports. And so they would tape it and then do edited versions the following Saturday, interspersed with other events. So they would start the race and then they would leave to do, swimming or golf or something, and they would do like 2 or 3 things and then come back. And then finally they went to prime time. The tape edited, but prime time that night. And then finally live in '86, which was rained out twice. Apparently the biggest rating they ever had, the highest rating ever, was the rain out on the original race day. But anyway, this year finally NBC now has the rights. And so ABC's had it since, as I say, from '65 until last year. Now it's NBC. And NBC decided that they wanted what was the radio booth. And so they moved to the 9th floor, and radio will now be on the 4th floor media center. But so I'm in this rather unusual position here, where we're going out and reaching out and spending time with NBC affiliates to say, you've got the race now, and there's all this history and so on and so forth. And some get it and some don't. But here I am promoting NBC television, when what we really want to do on behalf of the track is either A, go, or at least listen to the radio. Not much TV. So, or at least, maybe a lot of people tell me that they still will have the TV on, turn down the sound, and listen to the radio broadcast. So, anyway,
those are my favorite people, by the way.
Well,
we love turn up WDAN, turn down the TV.
Just don't tell my colleagues on the network, on the radio network, that I'm out talking about NBC, because I may not get as much airtime as I've had over the years.
Well, one of the pictures on my table is a picture of Sid Collins.
Yeah.
And if you wouldn't mind sharing a story or anecdote involving, does everyone know who Sid Collins is? The original voice of the 500. Would you mind talking about Sid?
Sure,
because you wouldn't be here today probably if it wasn't for Sid.
Absolutely. I've seen a lot of pictures of Sid. I don't think I've ever seen that one before. It's obviously a publicity shot, but I don't think I've seen that one. No, I owe Sid everything. From the time I first showed up a long time ago, I owe a lot of people a great deal of thanks. And I mean, it's many people that were extremely kind to me, and that was drivers and officials and so on and so forth. But I thought if I had to narrow it down, how hard would that be? Because sometimes somebody clearly has the biggest influence or the biggest help. And I started thinking about all the people, and I narrowed it down, and I'd have to make it a tie for first. And one would be Henry Banks, former driver and director of competition, who actually hired me to work at USAC in 1965. When I was just a kid, with a green card and here on a one-way ticket, and he took a chance on me and gave me the job at USAC, which lasted a long time. He's one, and then of course Sid. Sid took me under his wing and just put me on the broadcast. In fact, the first year there was, I hadn't been in. This could go on for a long time, but Short version is I had written to Sid before I came. There was a possibility I was going to come in '63, and it didn't quite work out yet. I thought, so I'll wait another year. But I already started putting out feelers, and what I thought that I could probably be involved as a runner, you know, spotter or something. I thought there had to be a way to somehow be involved, with a view to someday, wouldn't it be great if I could be on the air and so on and so forth. That was a daydream of mine from very early on. And it happened almost immediately from the time I showed up. There was discussion during the month that I was going to be on the broadcast on race day in '64. And I would ended up that they had me on as a guest. I mean, I remember going up there and did like a little audition. And Sid had this little box with you know, with a bunch of cards in, like recipes, and he picked out. He said to the producer, whose name was Bill Dean, he said, "Bill, watch this." And he goes up, and I remember the first card he asked me was Spider Web. Just pulled it out random, so I did Spider Web's record, and then he asked me about a guy named Johnny Fredericks, who had been entered a few times and never made a qualifying run, and I knew about him. And so, by the reaction from the producer, I thought, golly, I'm going to be on race day. And then whatever happened, I don't know. But Sid said, look, we're going to put you on the air. So, you know, let your parents know that you'll be on race day. And he said, come up about 2/3 of the way through the race. And so I did that. And I wasn't on very long. But it just seemed, I mean, people over the years, and even to this day, still say, I remember when you were on the first time. I mean, you never know the impact that you're having sometimes. It's startling.
How old were you?
I'm not telling you that. You knew that was coming.
I knew that was coming.
I forget. I don't know. Something. I don't know.
Are you here illegally now? I mean, it's a...
Yes.
Okay, just
Yes.
making sure, you know. Don't anybody showing up and all of a sudden Donald leaves.
No. Yep.
One of the other pictures I have, which is, if you know the history of the race, is Troy Ruttman. And we, in the back, we were discussing this earlier. Something happened on Sunday, which was historic, and that was the youngest driver in IndyCar history won a race. Colton Herta, who got lucky because 2 other people didn't come in for refueling. But you know, so it goes, and the kid ran a great race and he won his first IndyCar race at the age of 18 years old. But the youngest winner of the 500 is sitting over here with a picture signed. Could you give us a little background?
Troy Ruttman. Sure.
Troy Ruttman.
Yeah. I guess the records are made to be broken. I just like that one. I'll be very sad when it goes. I thought it was going to go in '06 because Mario Andretti looked like he was going to win the 500, and then coming down. Almost to the checker, and then Sam Hornish came out of nowhere. I still can't believe that. God. Anyway, I still... God, that did compression. I died. Did you hear that? Oh, God.
You're good.
No, all right, keep going, Donald. Tough crowd. Anyway, so Troy Ruttman was...
You're hanging on every word, Donald.
I better be careful, be a little more selective. But Troy Ruttman continues to be the youngest winner ever, and you know, maybe that'll get broken this year. But anyway, the story on that, and the fact that Jim Rathman is the other guy that you've got, Rathman and Ruttman actually grew up together. Well, you know, not as babies, but by the time they were in their mid-teens, when they were like 15 and 16 years old and already knew each other, and both actually ran in the 1949 500 illegally because you had to be 21 and they weren't. So Troy was supposedly, I think, 23 when he ran in the 1949 500, and then the next year when the reporters were saying, how old are you? I think he said 23. And then in 1951 he was 23, and everybody said, wait a minute. So it came out then that in 1951 he admitted that he had fudged a little bit, and that he was 21. his birthday was March the 11th of 1930. And what happened was that he wanted to start racing when he was a teenager. And actually I could go into great details on this, but the end result was that he actually got some help from his mother, whom I met. I met his mom, I met the dad, but the mother was really neat. And she said that that she actually altered the birth certificate. She worked for the health department, and she said you had to have exactly the right typewriter font. And so she experimented with different, we're pre-electric, but she actually doctored up the birth certificate so that it would look like he was born, and I think they locked like 3 years off or something. But his date of birth was actually March the 11th of 1930. So when he won the race on May 30th, 1952, I think it works out he was 22 years, 1 month, and 19 days, I think is how it works. But Jim Rathman had done the same thing. And in fact, he used a different name. His name wasn't James. That was his brother. So Dick Rathman, as we know him, was actually James, and Jim Rathman, as we know him, was Richard, except that's not his first name, that's his middle name. And he finally told me what his real name was, and it was Royal. And Jim Rathman was a real kidder, which surprised me because he always looked so solemn in all of the films. I remember going to the newsreel and seeing when he won the Monza 500. And he was just poker face. And then he won the 560 and still poker face. I thought, boy, that guy must be a real hard ass, because even when he wins, he doesn't look happy. And then when I met him, he was a really funny guy. And practical joker and so on and so forth. But anyway, he said that, no, my name was Royal Richard Rathman, but he said, I went by Richard. And I think he said that's still, he said, that's on my driver's license now, but I always raced a Jim, because I borrowed my brother's identity, and then he used mine, and we thought it would be too confusing to swap back. And so, but he said, actually, this is way more than you wanted to know, but he didn't get this on Wikipedia. He said, after I was born, my mother wanted to rename me Robert Alford. And he said, so when I started driving, getting speeding tickets, and I go down to the courthouse and they asked me he said, I didn't know what the hell my name was. And then also he said, he got speeding tickets a lot. And he said, one day I was down at LA at the courthouse. I had 2 court cases the same day, one for Jim and the other for Dick. And they were both big. But anyway, so he was actually 20 when he drove in his first 500. So 49, Ruttman and Rathman both drove in the 500. And it's funny because they've known each other since, I say so, they were like 15, 16, and they were both under 21. So anyway, there's been they finally, I think that Spike Gelhausen, because they changed the rules, I think Spike Gelhausen was the first person to drive in the 500 legally at under 21 years of age. And then I remember when Jose Garza was supposedly 22, and it turned out he was 19, and then that got a little bit tricky in retrospect. We didn't know it at the time, but when it came out, oh golly, 4 or 5 years later, and he would just grin. Jose had that wonderful grin. And so we finally nailed down that his birthday was March the 15th. And so, but when Ruttman won the race, it was May 30th, but when Jose drove in the race, it was May 24th. This gets very confusing. So Ruttman was still the youngest. But I remember when Michel Jourdain Jr. came along, and he was 19. And I remember his publicity person said, now, would he be the youngest driver ever to drive in the 500? And I checked his birthday. I said, no. I said, as a matter of fact, not only would he not be the youngest driver ever, he wouldn't even be the youngest Mexican ever to drive. But anyway, now we teenagers, and they get the early starts, and Colton Herter is the real deal. I mean, that was that phenomenal performance. And he will turn 19 on at the end of this week. I think it's the 30th is his birthday. Sorry, I got a lot of stories I wanted to tell, but this is, you're trying to MC the program, and
No,
I'm making it my own.
I'm just kicking things your way. I do want you to talk about Mario Andretti. I know there's things you'd like to talk about, but last year I think we spent some time on Foyt stories, which were great. But I would like you to, if you could, share a couple of your favorite anecdotes as it relates to Mario, since this is the 50th anniversary of his win.
I don't know about anecdotes so much as the fact that, and I got to be careful with this because I know people have their opinions, and you can state yours, and it doesn't necessarily coincide with the people that you're talking to, and so I don't want to say the wrong thing and upset anybody. But to me, not the claims, but the suggestions made out there about versatility and who's the most versatile driver ever. To me, it's Mario by a mile, because of the fact that he did so many different things and all at the same time. Back when you had the freedom to do that, which they can't now, unfortunately, and I think that's a shame that you don't have more interchange of drivers and different people running in. I mean, wouldn't it be great if Cashin Evers and Scott Dixon and Ed Carpenter did the Daytona 500 and all this kind of thing, and back and forth and everything. But when Mario did it, he had the freedom, for want of a better term, to do all these different things, and the fact that he did it for so long, it's not like he was winding up a contract and starting a new one so that there would be a little bit of overlap for 2-3 weeks. I mean, he took the deals that were offered him because he just loved racing. And so in 1967, he wins the Daytona 500. And apparently Holman and Moody were favoring Freddie Lorenzen, and whether those are fair claims or not, apparently they didn't make it easy for him to be able to win, but he won the friggin' Daytona 500. And then, I was thinking it was 3 weeks later, but it ended up it was 4 weeks later, Sebring, 12 hours. He wins that with Bruce McLaren. Daytona 500, Sebring 12 hours, worlds apart. He shares the winning car in both. Well, the Sebring race actually got postponed a week because there was like a fuel problem. There was something like there was contamination in the fuel, and so they postponed it a week. So he'd already committed to run the Atlanta stock car race for Holman and Moody, which was on Sunday. And so he wins Sebring with Bruce McLaren on Saturday, and he's at Atlanta in a NASCAR race the next day. And then it just went off for years like that, where he was doing, excuse me, all of it. I need to explain this a little bit. I caught a cold, I was over it. We went to Chicago to see the NBC people there, right at the affiliate, right downtown. And it turns out that there was 2 fellows on the air that I knew. I knew one. It ended up there was 2 that I knew. And they thought, wouldn't it be great if we parked on the street, right downtown, with the vehicle that we got out the front, and that we would do stand-ups. Well, I didn't have a coat, and it was freezing, and I paid the price for that. But
So we can blame WMAQ for this?
was it MAQ?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It was Phil Rogers, and then a fellow named Mike Berman, who briefly was on Fox 59, but he's from Chicago, and I didn't know that he was up there. But anyway, so back on the Mario thing, I mean, it was just year after year after year. And, even when he was running for the World Championship, he'd run F1 off and on. And in '77, he was 3rd in the World Championship for Lotus. And then in 78, he won. Well, he was still running as many USAC races as he could. He's driving for Penske. So Steve ran the whole season. And then Mario would run the races that he could. And that whenever he wasn't available, Rick Mears, who was the new boy on the scene, would run in his place if he wasn't available. And then they'd run a third car for Mears if Mario could. So, for 78, they had it worked out. You run Monaco, or Monaco, I guess is how it's pronounced, and then I think the start. Anyway, so you had the first qualifying weekend, and then on the second qualifying weekend was the Belgian Grand Prix. So, no problem. Qualify on the first weekend, and then go to Belgium, stay there, and then come back with the 500. Well, the whole first weekend in 78 got washed out. And so it ended up, they made an arrangement with USAC, because Mario was obviously a veteran, that they would allow somebody else to qualify the car for it. They normally frowned on, unless there was an injury or something, they didn't like having a designated qualifier. But in this case, it was because of an extenuating circumstance. And so Mike Hiss qualified the race for Mario, and I don't remember how he did in Belgium. I don't know if he won it, but anyway, so then it went on for years, and in 74 and 75, he's running for Welch Parnelli Jones, as is Al Unser, and they were kind of cherry picking the big ones. I don't think they ran the whole season in 75. They would just do the bigger races, but they were running the dirt races and the Formula 5000 series, and so on a Saturday, you know, the Who's Your 100, banging wheels with, you know, Bigelow and you know, you name all the great dirt track drivers, as Al and Mario was teammates. And then the next day, they're at a road course fighting with Brian Redman and finishing either first or second or third, all at the same time. And it's phenomenal. There's never been anybody, I mean, there's been other versatile people. I mean, you know, a lot of people say, well, Foyt's the most versatile driver. Oh, really? How did he do in Can-Am? You know, did he do Formula One? No. I take nothing away from Foyt. But just Mario went into all these different areas. Just like George Fulmer was one, and, you know, Gurney was all over the place, not doing dirt, but just there's never been anybody like Mario, and so much admiration for him. When you think that when they came to the United States when they were 15, they didn't want to come. He and his brother, they didn't want to come because they like going to Monza and you know, Ascari and Fangio were their heroes. And so when they came here, they were very reluctant, but then they found out, oh, there's racing here as well. And it's just amazing to me that by 1965, Mario's the USAC national champion, and doing these wonderful interviews and so the colorful acceptance speeches. I mean, he was so funny in a language that 10 years before he hadn't even understood. And just the people that he's met and being courted by, and so gracious. And the European journalists loved him because he was so accessible. And I remember Chris Economaki making the comment. He said, Mario's aware of everything that's going on around him. And I witnessed that for myself, and even was the benefactor a little bit, where he would be talking to reporters, and he's sort of spotting everybody that's going by. And that he always would find time to sit down with a journalist, and not all of his colleagues would find time to sit down with a journalist. So that, you know, the Europeans, the Brits and all the nationalities, they loved Mario because he was so accessible. So I think there's been, for many years, he was the best known racing driver in the world, and I think that pretty much continues today, if not the best known. Just something about the name, I don't know, but if you say the name Mario Andretti today, around the world, oh yeah, they remember. So I don't know if that's what I just said really does him justice or not, but It's just a phenomenal record in so many different types of racing at the same time. I'll just wind up with this, where I didn't appreciate the interchange of driver when we had it, but we used to, NASCAR would open their season with the Riverside 500, a 500-mile stock car race on a road course, which Dan Gurney won 5 out of 6 years, and you would have this amazing mix of the NASCAR regulars and the USAC people, and then the road racers, and then as well as, like the West Coast stock car guys. It was just this wonderful mix of drivers. And then a bunch of and then some of them would go to the Daytona 500, and then some of them would be at Sebring, and then they'd come and run Indianapolis, and I'm talking, in addition to your regulars, and 67, you had Jackie Stewart, Jim Clark, Dennis Holm, Jochen Rindt. There were 6 of them. I think there were 6 current Formula One guys that were in the 500, and then there was Leroy Yarborough and K.O. Yarborough, and then 3 weeks after Indianapolis was Le Mans. A bunch of them would go over there, and I actually, a little name drop in here, several years ago I was having breakfast in Florida with Elio Castroneves. And so anyway, he brought it up. He said, I love talking to Mario about when he used to do all that. And I said, would you like to do that? He said, yeah. I said, would you do Le Mans? He said, yeah. I said, what about Daytona? And I said, I don't mean the 24 hours. I said, would you do the Daytona 500? He said, absolutely. And I thought, isn't it a shame that those fellows can't go and run whatever they want to?
Great answer. And I had breakfast with Fowler, so I quite like a 3-time champion. My final question on Mario, and then you can go any direction you want. An interesting story that a picture was taken after, I believe, a poll for Mario, and Mario that he won, but it wasn't Mario in the picture. Yeah. Can you explain?
Yes. In 1969, Mario was part of the STP Corporation, and on paper, this looked like the front row. 4-wheel drive, rear-engine, turbocharged Ford Lotuses, 4-wheel drive. Mario Andretti, Graham Hill, Jochen Rindt. What could possibly go wrong? Well, Rindt and Hill never could get up to speed, but Mario was running above the track record unofficially. And so when he was a shoo-in for the pole. But the whole weekend got rained out, or virtually, and so rather than go into all of that, we got to Sunday evening and there were no qualifiers. So everything was going to have to be condensed into the 3rd and 4th day. And so they're practicing more. Mario's above the track record, and then on the Wednesday afternoon, I think like 4:15 or something like that, a hub broke. He had a major crash, and that 4-wheel drive Lotus was just busted into smithereens. And so the backup plan was they had the Brona Hawk Mark III, which they weren't even going to run. It had one Hanford, and they entered it for the 500, but it was just to get garage space. And they thought, well, we'll have to run this. And so they got it going, and he actually qualified for the middle of the front row. But he had sustained flash burns on his cheeks. He was very self-conscious about that. And so if you look at the qual shot, where he's sitting in the cockpit with or without the crew, he's got the helmet still on, and the sock is pulled up way high so you could just see the eyes look through. And it's because he was self-conscious about the badly burned cheeks. So that's in the qual shot. And then they do, I think probably it was Sunday morning, is when they did the front row shot. And it was Foyt, Mario's in the middle of the front row, and Bobby's on the outside of the front row. But if you look very carefully, it ain't Mario, it's Aldo. That's the little trivia there, but Aldo was then, they were fairly close to identical before Aldo got hurt in a sprint car accident in 1969. And so he just posed, and that's sort of kind of a little trivia there.
All right, well, Donald, you came prepared with stories. Story away.
Well, we'll do Q&A here, but some things happened that I just feel like I want to tell this story. Yesterday, my phone rings, and it was John Ruby, Lloyd Ruby's son. Wonderful young man, and of course Rube was the greatest ever, and his wife, who's now deceased, and John and his sister Mary Ann, they're just wonderful. I still call them kids, but they're not kids anymore. So I said, John, where? I said, I was just thinking about your dad over the weekend, and blah 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 blah. This is true. And so I said, well, where are you? He said, I'm in the museum. So anyway, I went down, and we sat on a bench in the museum for probably 45 minutes and told stories. And I was telling him a story about Bill Puterbaugh. And so a gentleman in the back here asked me if I would be, would I talk about Puterbaugh? I said, yeah, you know what, this is going to work. Instead of asking for the question, I'm just going to tell it. So in no particular order, when Ruby passed away, Al Unser's daughter died, and she was the elder. She was the redhead, so she was little Al's older sister, and she had passed away. And so Puterbaugh was so close to Al and Ruby, and I'll get to the little story here, that, and this was in January, I think it was just like the dead of winter, and there was snow on the ground, and anyway, Puterbaugh took off from Indianapolis and drove by himself, and I think he drove straight through to Albuquerque to go to the Al daughter viewing, which was hypothetically Thursday night, I don't know. And then stayed there, and then left, and then went down to Wichita Falls for Ruby's, and then went to the funeral, and then turned around and went straight back. I mean, I didn't go to Big Al's. I wanted to, but I was already committed to go down to Ruby's, because they asked me if I would do a eulogy, which was one of the, very proud moment for me, because I sat in the front row with Parnelli and Rutherford, and we did eulogies, and it don't get any better than that for a schmuck like me. So anyway, then we went to the grave site. I said, where's Puterbaugh? And Dave Laycock said, oh, he already left. He went back to Indianapolis. Anyway, so this was the story. Puterbaugh told me this. He said, because he actually was first at the Speedway in 1968, but it was 75 before he qualified. And they got an Eagle. He'd been befriended by Lee Elkins, who was a crusty old car owner from the 50s with the McNamara Specials. Had been out of it for years and now was back in. And he liked Puterbaugh. And so they got a Patrick Racing Team Eagle, which Bignotti set up. And I remember talking to Bignotti about the time, because that thing ran very well. And I remember George said, well, he said, we set it up for them. And he said, we like Puterbaugh. And he said, but also, I didn't want the reputation where somebody would say, well, Bignotti sold us a bunch of junk. He said, I want to have the thing running right. Well, anyway, Puterbaugh was having a bit of a struggle. As I say, Bignotti said, it's ready to go, just warm it up and you can qualify it. Well, Puterbaugh was having a struggle. And it turned out it was probably him. And he said, so I'm sitting there one day, and here comes Ruby and Big Al, who were both very good friends of each other, but friends of Puterbaugh. I mean, he was really, really thick with both of them. And he said, so they come wandering over, and they said, you could use some help. And Puterbaugh said, yeah. And so we've been talking about it, and we could tell you a few things, but we think it would be confusing if we both tried to help you. So if you need either of us, we decided that we'll toss a coin, and whoever loses the toss will be your chief, will be your helper. So anyway, Ruby loses the toss. So Ruby comes over and says, all right, And Peter Boy said, I'm sitting in the cockpit. And he says, you're backing off way too early. You're backing off at the start finish line. Haul her all the way down to the crossover gate. And Peter Boy said, going into turn 1? You're crazy. You're trying to kill me. And Ruby says, son, haul her down to the gate. It'll stick. Trust me. And then he says, okay, let's see what you got here. So he said, he comes around to the front of the car. And he's wearing his cowboy boots. And he said, he's got his hands in his pockets. And he said, he sticks the toe of the boot underneath the nose cone. And he says to the crew, drop this down an inch. And then he walks around the car and makes several other suggestions about, you know, how the wickers should be placed and how much weight you got here. Or do a couple of turns on the right, and all this kind of stuff. And then he said, go out. And he said, beautiful. He said, I picked up 6 miles an hour. And he said, I'm so grateful to Ruby. He said, he was my engineer, and he set me up. He never even took his hands out of his pockets. So, anyway, different back then. Didn't need no computers. Just stuck his cowboy boot under the cone and says, drop it down an inch. All right. Is there any other business that we need to take care of here before we have
Well, we have Larry Cannon's daughters here, and so
good.
I know you always enjoy sharing a story. Then Mike's got some tickets to give away.
We do. We're not going to give them away.
You're going to earn them.
That's the next one. Yeah.
You're going to earn them.
We did this
I'll
last
let you do a Larry
year.
Cannon story, and then you can earn some tickets.
Well, actually, I've got a Larry Cannon question. So, let's see how we do on this. Some of these things that we do, as you prefaced, we do a lot of service organizations, and so we're this week's speaker. And we hope that there are a few race fans out there, but you know, they have a speaker every week and it's all kinds of subjects. But for this event, you're all race fans, and thank you, Mike, for putting this on again. You all came out because hopefully this is what you wanted. So it's heavier duty questions. So what we've got is 3 sets of qualification tickets for the 500, which you can use on either May the 18th or the 19th. It'll be a pair. And also, we've got 2 sets of general admission for the Indy Grand Prix, the road race that actually opens the curtailed season now. So, you'll have your choice. I will pose the question, and then we're going to ask you, please don't call out the answer. If you think you know what the answer is, if you would raise your hand, and if it's a tie, Mayor Harmus will pick somebody, and then we'll keep going until, you know, if you don't get the answer, then we'll go to the next one within reason, and then he will give you the choice. So you can either get a pair of 500 qualification tickets or a pair of Indy GP tickets. So the first question will be, and this is a Larry Cannon one, and we're ramping it up a little bit. Now, don't call out, please. Hands in the air. Boom Boom had 3 starts in the 500, and each of the 3 races had something in common. What was the same about the 3 500s in which Larry Cannon had a start? Hands in the air. Is he eligible?
No, I'm not
all right.
eligible.
Yes, sir.
Rain?
No, not rain.
Started in the same spot?
No, didn't start the same spot. In the back.
Was he relief driver?
No, but no, he was a relief driver in the 4th one. No, all right, I'll give you the years. His starts were, and hands in the air, please. Boom Boom's starts were 74, 76, and 80. Yes, sir.
Johnny Rutherford.
Rutherford won all 3. That's it.
Very good. You can applaud that. That's great.
Now, on that relief job, that's a pretty neat story, but I can't tell the whole story because it's got a very bad word in it, at least once. But the thing is that he missed the show. There have been driver switches where, like a NASCAR guy that was obligated if there was a rain delay, like Robbie Gordon had to leave and go to Charlotte, and then Jacques Lazier got in for him. There have been other driver switches, but the last time that the race was going on and a driver made a pit stop and got out and somebody else got in, the last time that happened was 1977, and it was when Larry Cannon got in for John Mailer. And there was a dispute that where the bad word comes in, where that stop was longer than it needed to be because they were trying to resolve something financially, and the boomer tactfully suggested that perhaps we should settle this later and continue on with the automobile race. And so anyway, by the time he got out, he only ran 8 laps before the thing was over. But anyway, it was 77 and Foyt won the race. And he was very proud of the fact where he said, I am one of the few people who could say I was actually on the track when Foyt won his 4th. But anyway, very good. Let's see. I've made a few notes because I thought, boy, I can't do the usual ones that we do here. So, oh yeah. There have been a number of drivers over the years who have finished in second place more than once and never won. All right, since the early 2000s, there are 2 drivers, hands in the air please, there are 2 drivers since the early 2000s that have finished second in the Indianapolis 500 twice. Finished second twice and never won. So hands in the air if you can name one of them. Yes, sir.
Could be Marco Andretti?
No, not Marco Andretti. He had 1 second.
Okay.
All right. 2 drivers who had second twice and never won. Yes. Somebody, I thought I saw, all right, the lady first.
Is it Ray Hall?
No, not Graham Rahal.
Scott Goodyear?
Well, Scott Goodyear is a 2-time runner-up, but that was prior to the
That's not how it
2000s.
was.
So you would be correct, except that there's 2 that are more recent than that.
Did you say 2 drivers or 1?
There's 2, just give me one.
Carlos Munoz?
Carlos Munoz is 1. Very good. Excellent. And I think, I don't follow it like I should, but I think he's been rumored to be hooked up with somebody just within the last few days, I think. But, all right, and then hands in the air, please. Who's the other one? Ooh. Yes?
Helio Castroneves.
Helio Castroneves?
Yeah.
He won it 3 times, so this is somebody that was second twice
But he
and never won.
A couple times, though, wasn't he?
Yeah, but he won. The
Yeah.
point is that this driver never won. Yes,
Is it Tony Kanaan?
it is not. Tony Kanaan won. Nope, nope, neither one of those. May have to move on. Yes, sir.
Hildebrand?
Nope, not Hildebrand.
What about Dan Weldon?
Dan Weldon won twice. He was also runner-up twice, but he won twice. Yes,
Hinchcliffe? Hinchcliffe?
not Hinchcliffe, no. All right, I think we better move on. It was Vito Mira. Was runner-up in 05 and 08. All right, this one goes back a way. Now think about this for a moment. You can blurt names out, but give it some thought. Hands in the air, please. Who was the last driver to finish in the top 5 in the 500 with a front engine car? In the top 5, in the back.
AJ Foyt?
AJ Foyt was the last to win.
Yeah.
Who was the last person to get in the top 5?
Wasn't winning in the top 5.
Well, you are correct, but there was one after 64.
Burnaby?
Yes, not Hurtubise.
Jim Hurtubise?
Not Hurtubise. Yes,
Roger Ward?
not Roger Ward.
Cornelli Jones?
Not Cornelli Jones.
Jim Clark.
Not Jim Clark in a front engine car? No. Yeah. Gordon John Cock is the correct answer.
Ah,
Yes.
very good.
1965, the Weinberger Home Special Number 76, which had been Ruby's third place finish of the year before. All right, then you get your choice, and I think we've got 2 more sets to give. 2 sets, Mayor?
Got it.
All right. Can you name the driver, hands in the air please, who is the driver who's led more laps of the 500 than any other driver? Yes, sir.
Rick Mears?
Not Rick Mears.
Floyd?
Way in the back.
Oh.
Michael Andretti.
Not Michael Andretti. His is the most number of laps led by somebody that hasn't won.
Oh, that's not
If you've already won, by the way, we'll, one per, yes.
Tony Kanaan?
Not Tony Kanaan, no. All-time lap leader, more laps than anybody ever, not just active, more laps than anybody ever. Yes,
Hideo Castroneves.
not Kester Evans. Oh, I thought this would be an easy one.
Tom Sneed.
I'm sorry?
Tom Sneed.
Not Tom Sleva. Okay, yes, sir.
Mario Andretti?
Not Mario.
Oh, I know it.
Yeah. How many guesses can they get per? It doesn't really matter.
Got a couple of rookies right there.
It's Danville, Illinois. It doesn't matter, does it? Okay, way in the back. Didn't
Big
even-
Al.
It's Al's a senior, yes. Right. 644 laps.
I knew it.
Well, the reason that I wanted to get somebody who hadn't asked yet, and I think that was about your 8th gas. All right, one more set. I may have to go back to an evergreen. I think this. All right, we've done this one a couple of times. It's a bit of a challenge. There have been since late 50s. There have been 2 examples of an Indianapolis 500 winner and a runner-up, not the same year, but there's been a winner and a runner-up that had the same surname, but they were not related. That's important, not related. There's been 2 examples of that. So hands in the air if you can give me either of the surnames and then both of the drivers. A winner, and then also somebody that finished second that never won, same surname, not related. So it ain't untrue, and it ain't Andretti.
That ain't Floyd.
Was there ever a point that was a runner-up?
No, it's what I'm saying, it ain't Floyd.
It ain't point, right? Was there ever a Mears that was a runner-up?
No.
And if there was, the only other Mears I know was a relative, the brother. These people were not related. Oh, we'll stay with this for a little bit. It's the same surname, not related. An Indianapolis 500 winner. One of them won more than once. Yes, sir.
Maybe Ward?
Ward is one. Can you name the 2 wards?
Roger.
Yeah, Roger.
I know.
That's right.
My buddy will help me.
Jeff Ward. Jeff Ward was runner-up in '99, and they were not related. So I think that mercifully, that's it. All right.
What's the other one?
I'll tell you next year.
I asked Donald, what's the other one, and he just says, I'll tell you next year.
Well, I've got
homework to
to
do.
say these for other events. No, Jones. Parnelli Jones and Davy Jones were not related. And then, by the way, let me, a little tip of the hat for Davy Jones that kind of flew under the radar. In 1996, he was second in the 500, And then 3 weeks later, she had the winning car in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And most people don't remember that at all. It just flew under the radar. All right, I'll put it back in your hands.
Okay, well, let's do some questions from the floor. So if you have a question for Donald, raise your hand. Before we do that, let's take a little poll in the room. If you've been to 50, no. If you've been to 20 Indianapolis 500s, please stand up. At least 20, minimum of 20. Let's look at the room here. 20 500s. That's pretty cool. All right, if you've been to 30, 30 500s. You've been to 40 Indianapolis 500s. If you've been to 50 Indianapolis 500s. If this is going to be your 60th 500, please keep standing. In the back, 60th Indianapolis 500 coming up this year. That's pretty cool. We've got 61, 62, 63 500s, which is great. And then we've got the sister of the gentleman that, if they can work out the medical situation, will attend his 73rd consecutive Indianapolis 500 coming up this month of May, which is pretty cool. And Brenda, if you wouldn't mind standing up, Brenda Demas. So Donald, I know you know Brenda. Brenda holds a distinction in this room. One, she was one of the original Jeff Gordon fan club presidents back when he was just a kid in Pittsburgh running around. But Brenda also attended the funeral of Don Branson. So Donald, would you mind sharing a Don Branson story for us?
Champaign, Illinois, 29 Howard Street. I don't know why I remember that. Don Branson. I'm going to pick out one story, but I tell you that he came to USAC at a time when a lot of people would be backing off. And I mean, because for years he just ran IMCA and had a job. And so by the time he started to move into USAC, I mean, he wasn't in his mid-20s anymore. And so when he really blossomed, I mean, he was in his 40s. And he was mentor to so many drivers. I mean, you don't think about Don Branson, but if you talk to the racers, Rutherford was a huge Don Branson fan. And I remember Sam Sessions, you can go on down the line, Dixon, and he gave the impression, he came over as a little bit grumpy, and he wasn't really that way, he just came over that way. But he would go to drivers and say, you know, I've been watching you. Have you tried doing so-and-so-and-so? Why don't you try so-and-so? And he would actually give them tips, and I can't be any more specific than that. But just his forte was dirt. He didn't like rear-engine cars, although he did okay with them. But I think that the rumor was for '67 that A.J. Watson was going to build a front-engine car for Don Branson, because like Hurtubise, Branson really believed that a lightweight front-engine car could still get the job done. And it was tragic that he lost his life when he was about ready to step aside. Apparently he had taken a job with Goodyear to be like a field rep. And I don't know whether he was just going to run the 500 only or just completely stop. And then when he had the accident at Ascot, he was 46. Now, that's not that unusual now, because we've got drivers that are considerably, you know, stay much longer than that. But that was very unusual back then. And, but he was just an outstanding sprint car driver, a dirt track guy. Let's see, would he be the last person to win a championship race with a front engine car? Because he won Phoenix in '65 with the wins I think it was the roadster rather than the dirt car. And I'll, just a little aside on that. When dirt tracks started to become paved, or paved tracks were built as paved tracks, I think the thinking was that you'd get the Indianapolis roadsters would go to Milwaukee and Trenton and so forth. But while the drivers who had a roadster available to them, many preferred the dirt car. And so when Branson would go to Trenton, he'd run the dirt car, not the roadster. As far as a specific story, I'll probably think of one going home, but I don't. But I know that I was always, for some reason, that address just stuck in my mind. And one of the trips that we made over to Champaign, I think last year, I said to Mayor Harmless, I said, look, I hope I'm not wasting your time, but I've always wanted to do this. Could we find 29 Howard Street? And so we did, and we drove by, and I don't know, I just looked at that, that's where Don Branson lived. And another one in Champaign, I never checked the address on this one, but there was a driver named Lee Drollinger that I never met, and I'm kicking myself because I could have. He was in 65. I thought that was a neat name. I just was fascinated. One of the things that fascinated me was the drivers' names. And I thought Lee Drollinger was a great name. And he was at a USAC stock car race that I attended. And I thought, nah, he's busy. I won't bother him. He's deceased now. I met Brenda a long time ago. All I'll say.
I won't say how old you are.
All right, that's a deal. The first time I was aware of her was I was at USAC as a young pup, and Brenda had just got her first job, and as I recall, she donated her entire first paycheck, not $10, the entire check she donated to the USAC Benevolent Fund. I think that was right. When Tom Binford was president, or something very close to that.
Tom was president and gave me an honorary membership then to USAC. And I was in Gasoline Alley one day talking to Tom Binford, and he said, meet this young man from England. His name is Donald Davidson.
So
That was last year when you were in your 20s.
exactly right.
And she was in her teens.
That's right.
All right, other questions from the floor? Again, if you have a question for Donald, we're going to have you talk to the microphone so that it's captured on the podcast as long as Donald says it's okay.
Hello, Donald. My wife Jackie is related to Jean Hartman, and she's all
Gene Hartley.
Jean Hartley, yeah.
Yeah.
And also Charlie Musselman. Did Charlie ever try to run the 500?
No, but good Lord. Related to Gene Hartley
Well,
and Charlie Musselman?
Mother, father.
Oh, okay.
No.
No, Charlie Musselman drove championship cars,
Yeah.
but never had a 500 ride.
Okay.
And I met him, and that was another one that I thought, what a neat name. He was second in the AAA Eastern Sprint Car Championship in 1955 behind Tommy Hinterschutz.
Okay.
And I met him, Jack Beckley introduced me to Charlie Musselman in a bar called The Cove that was right across the street from the track in that shopping center.
Did he own a bar?
Charlie Musselman?
Yeah.
Probably. Because, I mean, that used to be, when things were a little different from the way they are now, was the sign that you had made it as a race driver was that you owned your own bar. You made it. But, yeah, I just got a kick out of meeting him, and we didn't have much conversation. It was just a very, very nice guy.
Fantastic picture of one of his accidents. I think it Look magazine back.
Yes, that was Williams Grove, I think. It was,
Williams Grove.
yeah. We just had this elaborate accident, but he drove a handful of championship races, but sprint cars on dirt, half-mile dirt tracks seem to be his forte.
Do you have any good Gene Hartley stories?
A good Gene, yeah. Well, Gene Hartley was a really interesting guy because he was always business. And a little bit of an odd personality. I mean, he was fine with me, but he could be abrupt and I think he liked to shock you with comments. Anyway, I hadn't been at USAC very long, and let's just say that Gene Hartley, from 57 through 61, was in the top 3 in USAC midget points 5 years in a row. And he was third, first, third, and third. And the only way that you could do that, because there were so many midget races, you couldn't cherry pick and be high in the points. You'd have to run a lot. And so I hadn't been at USAC very long, and they had the last several years of National Speed Sport News. And I decided to do some research on the Turkey Night Grand Prix that was still at Ascot then, because everybody would show up. You'd have the midget regulars, but you'd have Foyt and Parnelli and Mario and Bobby and Al Unser and on and on and on and on. And so I did a compilation of all the drivers that run Turkey Night. And I noticed that Gene Hartley didn't appear in any of them. And so he had retired as a driver by the time I was at USAC, but he and Leroy Warner were promoting the Speedrome. And he would come into the office, probably a couple of times a week, USAC office on 16th Street, to see Bob Stroud, who was the midget supervisor. And so he came in this one time, and I said, I've just done all this research on Turkey Night, and I can't find where you ever ran there. He said, oh no, I never did. He said, I never went to the West Coast. I said, you never went to the West Coast? He said, no. I said, but what about all those years when you were chasing points? He said, I didn't chase points. He said, I would look at the schedule, look at the distance, and figure out the purse. And he said, if I didn't think I had a chance to come home with at least as much as I left with, why go? Why spend a lot of money and come back, at a loss? And then another comment was, he said, I didn't like Langhorne. He said, Roger Ward stopped going, and he said, I wouldn't go either. I said, well, you finished second. That was by far his best championship, because he was a very good midget driver, but in championship cars, he'd bring him home. He had a really good finishing record, but he would be, like 10th and 11th. And in fact, he was 10th, and he was 11th 3 times. He'd sit out there and run, 4.5, 5 hours, and he'd be running at the end. He'd bring him home. And so anyway, he got second at Langhorne in 1956, behind George Amick. And when I said, but you finished second. He said, yeah, but I didn't like it, so I didn't go back. And so that was just a little odd personality, but lot of great stories, and he was just all business.
What did he do at the drone there in
At the Speedrome?
Yeah.
He and Leroy Warner were the partners.
Oh.
They promoted it.
Okay.
Yeah. And they did that for a number of years.
What year was that?
Yes, probably. I don't know if he was still driving, because he stopped in 63. It would have been around probably 63.
Okay.
And then they did that for, 6, 7 years. And I mean, they would do all of the stock cars and the figure 8s and everything, but they put midget shows on occasionally. Not that they were great money makers, but he and Leroy.
Did he live in Indianapolis?
Yes. Yes. North Priscilla Drive.
Thank you.
All right, question out of the audience.
Yeah, Donald, a pleasure for you to talk to you. Could you talk about Dick Simon and being the first car on the racetrack when they used to open the racetrack on like the 1st of May, and it looked to me like when I was there that Dick Simon wanted to be the first car on the track at
Yeah.
that time. And also, if you have any remembrance of Don King from the promoter at Terre Haute Action Track?
What about Don Smith?
Don King, that was the promoter at the Terre Haute Action Track.
Don King was the boxing.
Oh,
promoter.
no, Don Smith. I'm
You mean
sorry.
Don Smith?
Yeah, Terre Haute first national plane. Well, it's close, I had Don right.
All right, well, we'll go in all kinds of directions here, so I'll try to make these brief, and I'm afraid I haven't done a very good job of it. Dick Simon did have the reputation of being the first on the track. No, he liked to get the first entry in and be first on the track. Well, he got the idea from Phil Hedback, who was a Bryant Heating and Cooling distributor in Indianapolis. And that was a thing that I don't think a lot of people did realize, was that the Bryant Heating and Cooling specials, which were there every year, and very, very often the first entry and the first on the track, Phil Hedback had no factory backing at all. He was a dealer, and he'd keep going to the factory and saying, look, I'm just a little guy doing this myself. Look at all this publicity I get. Because he realized the publicity value when the entries, they don't do this now, it's all different, but the entries used to be mailed out to all of the teams over the Christmas, New Year holidays. And then normally, January the 2nd, January the 3rd, there'd be this big deal about who got the first entry in. And then all the way through, February, March, there would be, 6 more entries today for the 500. And Bobby Ince coming back for the, 16th year or whatever it is. And which they now got away from. But Phil Hedback saw the publicity value because, golly, until, you didn't even, it wasn't until 67, I think, that you had the Pacers. It was high school basketball and the 500. And so everything that happened out there was news. And he realized that there was a lot of publicity and photo ops to be had by having the first car on the track, Hedback, and then trying to be the first to qualify and so on and so forth. So Dick Simon drove for Volstead, Rolla Volstead, with Bryant's sponsorship, and it kind of, he took that ball and ran with it, and also saw the value for sponsors by saying, look at all the ink I'm getting here. And you had a couple of other things that you wanted me to comment on.
Terre Haute Action Track.
Oh.
The promoter down there.
All right, well, Don Smith, I mean, the action track, Joe Quinn was the original promoter, and he was a Holman and Company employee. In fact, I think he was like the head of the gas company or something like that. And so Don Smith was related to Tony, and I think how it was, I gotta remember how this was. I think Don Smith's dad and Tony were first cousins, I think. And Tony Holman's mother was Grace Smith. So they were all tied in somehow. I'm probably getting too heavy here, so let me lighten this up with a little bit of trivia. Right after the war, Tony Holman and Henry Smith, Don Smith's dad, Tony was doing all kinds of investments apart from buying the Speedway. Joe Cloutier had him making all kinds of investments, and they purchased a farm down in Vincennes. And then they thought, well, we don't know anything about farming, but we own this farm. We need to have somebody run it for us. And so they hired the Vigo County, or I still don't know if it's Vigo or Vigo, but the Vigo County extension agent is who they hired to run the farm. Does anybody know who that was? who was the Vigo County extension agent who they hired to run that farm right after the war? Anybody? You kick yourself. Orville Redenbacher. True story. Yeah, true story. I need to redeem myself just a little bit. I didn't really give you a good shot on Dick Simon. Should we try and do a few? I like doing lengthy anecdotes, and the number I'd have liked to.
We have 5 minutes until we told you the time that we were going to be done is up. But that's entirely up to you, but Mike just gave me the thumbs up.
All right, can we
That's
do,
pretty good.
can we maybe do a few that hopefully would require a brief answer? Yes, sir.
What color flag was used prior to the 1930 race when they started using the green flag to start the race?
Red.
Yeah, you're right.
You didn't hear the question, but he was asking about the fact that the flags in 1930 were completely revised, the meaning. In fact, the checkered flag was the only one that remained the same. That always meant the race is over, you're finished. But, so when authors wax lyrical and talk about the Marmon Wasps coming down for the green flag in 1911. It didn't come down for the green flag, it came down for the red flag. And all of the red is how you started the race up through 1929. And I think green was one to go, and then all of the flags meant something else except for the checker. And I often thought that since that had been in play for all of those years, what was it like for a driver who'd been around for a while, running in 1930, and the flags meant something else? But,
Donald, since Kyle's here, how about the history of the helmet, if you could do it quickly?
well, there's various claimants as to who had the first helmet. They wore cloth helmets. But Rickenbacker, there's photograph in Rickenbacker's book of a hard hat of some kind. Louis Chiron from Monaco, not France as is often said, in 1929 wore a helmet. And then in 1932, Wilbur Shaw, in the 1932 500, Wilbur Shaw wore what looks like a polo helmet that was given him by Sir Henry Seagrave, who was a Brit who did the land speed record. And so when Wilbur started wearing this, I think that he took a lot of needling, and some unkind things were said about him because he, was not manly enough to just wear the cloth helmet. But the other drivers started to wear the hard hats. And in 1934, I think there was 12 drivers. It looks like there's 12 drivers of the 1934 500 are wearing the hard hat, and they were all front runners. And then in 1935, they made them mandatory. You had to wear the helmet, such as it was, although the Cromwells were like crushed paper. But just a couple of comments about helmets. Peter DiPaolo, who I got to know very well, and he said, we wore those cloth helmets. And he said, they were dear little things that you put on. And he said, they kept the hair out of your eyes, but that was about it. And so then the other one was Henry Banks, because I said the British Cromwell helmet was made out of crushed paper. And Henry Banks, I remember this like it was yesterday, it was a long time ago. He said, when I joined AAA in 1935, I had to buy a helmet. He said, I'd been racing for several years, but I wore cloth helmets. He said, so the first helmet that I bought, he said, offered me slightly more protection than the box it came in. I remember. And then, of course, great helmet advances and technology over the year. They started to wear what looked like the jet pilot helmet. And I think 53 was the first year that anybody wore one of those. And then the first full face helmet I remember very well. Dan Gurney drove it in wore one in the 1968 500, and I hadn't seen it all month. And I remember looking down on race morning and thinking, what the hell is that? Because it was a full face, and the first one I'd ever seen. And there were a few holdovers that liked the open face. George Snyder, Bill Englehart. I think the last person to wear an open face in the 500 was Lloyd Ruby in 1974. And so, I mean, I could go on about helmets, but let's move around and maybe...
Well, Mike says it's about time. We got a question here and a question there.
All right.
What two Indy 500 winners do you share a birthday with?
What two 500 winners do I what?
Do you share a birthday with?
Oh, Jimmy Bryan and Takuma Sato.
All right, question here, Tom.
Don't figure out the year, but I'm not.
Right here.
Can you imagine to say Jimmy Bryan and Takuma Sato in the same paragraph?
You never thought that was going to
Thought
happen.
that. You know what? There is a day earlier in the month where there are 3 500 winners share the same birthday. One of them is no longer living. January the 10th is Bobby Rahal, Roger Ward, and Eddie Cheever all have the same birthday. And I tried to get a photograph one year. Roger was around, and I tried to get, I thought, wouldn't it be great to get the 3 of them in a shot? We never got it done, and it was that we couldn't get Roger. But I remember when I went to ask them if they would do it, both Ray Hall and Eddie Cheever said, in their response on that, they both said, I would be honored to have my photograph taken with Roger Ward. I thought that was pretty neat how well respected he was.
We used to go to Joliet on Saturday night for the midgets, and we'd see Jigger Sir Royce.
Yeah.
Did Jigger Sir Royce drive the car from Chicago down to Indianapolis for Andy Granatelli when Granatelli first went there?
No, Jigger was in school when the Granatellis. I think the Granatellis drove it themselves, but Danny Claytis was the driver the first year.
We used to see him and his boy,
George.
George.
Yeah. Now I think the Granatellis drove it down. Henry Bach, I don't know if that name rings a bell. Dr. Henry Bach passed away quite recently, and it was about 3 years ago, and I was in conversation with him, and he mentioned Jigger. And he said, did you know Jigger was a really good basketball player in school? I said, no, I know Jigger. I'd never heard that before. I said, how did you know that? He said, I used to play him. And so Jigger was from Hammond, Indiana, and then moved down to Shelby, which is down a little bit. And evidently Hank Bach was in the same area, and that's one of my fascinations over the years has been who knew who when. And they actually played basketball as like 15-year-olds. And I'll just throw a couple more in here. When Al Unser drove in the 87 500 with the car that came out of the showroom, or out of the hotel lobby in Pennsylvania, and Cummins miraculously became the sponsor, that was done over a dinner between Jim Henderson, who was then the head of Cummins, and Penske. They'd gone to military school together and knew each other since they were teenagers. Tim Cindric, who's now the president of Penske Racing over everything, sports cars, NASCAR, the whole shebang. Who was his best friend in school? In Brownsburg, and then later Pike School, and I realize that we're in a different state here, but you're honorary Hoosiers right now. Who was Tim Cindric's best friend in school?
Jeff Gordon.
No, it wasn't Jeff Gordon. Yes.
The current governor of Indiana.
You are correct. Eric Holcomb, the governor of Indiana, and he confirmed that. And so I thought, God, can you imagine these 10, 12, 13-year-old kids, and playing basketball together. Now, once they had a Penske and the other's the governor of the state. I just love stuff.
All right, well, the mayor's saying we gotta wrap up. I want to point out that everyone's got on their table a little flyer from the Speedway with a list of the important dates and activities at the track. I will tell you that I was coming home from a flight late one night in Indianapolis a couple weeks ago, and I stopped at the display in the airport lobby, and I filled my bag with this stuff. So no one, sir, what are you doing with 500 of those? But I want to share them with my friends back home in Danville. So that's what those are. So you're very welcome. We want to thank tonight Lee's Famous Recipe Chicken and Strips, Rawhide Meat, Troll Run Buddies Home Furnishings, and of course 1490 WDAN and 94.9 K-Rock, who are your local homes for the Indianapolis 500 on race day, where you will hear Donald Davidson. And let's give Donald a warm thank you for your time today.
We were kind of banging off walls a little bit tonight, so it wasn't the most organized presentation that I've ever been involved with, but bless you all, and hope you had a good time, and I missed Boomer's daughter. Was that, I think I saw her.
She's right there.
But all right, I did a double take because I wasn't sure if it was her or not, but anyway, we'll come in just a few moments.
All right, well, thank you all very much. The bar remains open. Thank you.